All right. Welcome everyone to this week's NIM community call. This is a very special one, as you see from the timing. We're doing it at a very different time from the usual time, and that is because we're joined by a gang who's partly based in Australia. Right? It's a pretty exciting call. I'm super excited to have you guys on. We have the session team with us. So Alex, Chris, and Key, can you guys please introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'll start it off. I'm Alex. I'm the president of the Session Foundation, or the Session Technology Foundation, which is a Swiss foundation which we just started up to steward the project last year.
Yep, my name's Key. I'm one of the technical co-founders at Session. So been working here and there about 7 years on Session and the related stuff that we do here. Really keen to chat to the NIM community and tell you more about what we're up to.
And hi, I'm Chris. I'm one of the co-founders of Session as well, and I'm part of the Session Foundation. I've been with the project from the day dot, and keen to get into it with you guys.
It's lovely to have you guys on. Can't wait to jump into it. Before that, I will have to go through a few housekeeping items. First of all, I will have to introduce my co-host as well, who's Theo, who most of the NIM community probably already knows. How is it going, Theo?
It's going really good, guys. Happy to have you guys on. We already got some people in the chat. And like I said before we went on, I'm really jealous of the Session studio background. I really like the green wild theme, and you can kind of hide in the metadata in the forest. I like that kind of thing. There you go. Yeah, exactly.
True. That makes two of us. I'm also quite jealous. So we have to spin something like that up, Theo, for these community calls at some point. And then, of course, yours truly, I'm Sudo, aka Simon. I'm head of community at NIM, and I'm your host today. Now, before we get started, big thanks for everyone who joined us live. This unusual hour. The recording, of course, will be available as usual on our YouTube channel and also on Twitter. So if you couldn't quite make it live, sorry about the timing, but you can catch up with us on the recording. We are going to do a Q&A. So as usual, I'm going to be picking up questions that are highly relevant to what we're talking about at the time, or I'm just going to be going through all of the questions at the end during the Q&A. So make sure if you have any questions for Alex, Chris, or Key, or myself, or Theo, then leave them in the chat on YouTube or Twitch. And if you don't want to compromise your privacy by logging in with your YouTube account, you can also leave your questions on the NIM Matrix server. We're also keeping an eye on the general chat of the NIM Matrix server. Now, with all of that being said, let's give the audience a bit of a primer on Session. What are you guys doing? What is Session about?
Yeah, so Session's a private messaging application, end-to-end encrypted. Typically, when I introduce Session, people want to know how it compares to, say, Signal or Telegram or WhatsApp. I think there's 3 big differences with how Session works. So the first thing is it doesn't require a phone number to sign up, which is huge for a lot of users who maybe enjoy Signal or enjoy Telegram, but they have to put in their phone number, and that immediately gives up some of your anonymity and privacy. Second, Session uses a onion routing network. So I'm sure all of the NIM people would be fairly familiar with the different network anonymity situations that are going on. But Session uses an onion routing network to hide your IP address when you send messages through the network. So basically you do these 3 hops, and that obscures your sending destination, or the destination that your message arrives at from the actual origin being your IP address. And the third thing is it's decentralized. So it operates on top of a network of 2,200 nodes that are operated by the community all around the world, very similar to how NIM operates as well, with a community of node operators. And that distinguishes it from, say, Telegram or Signal, where you have a central company who just runs all of the servers and then ends up getting access to metadata, whether they want to or not, just because people are interacting with those servers directly. That's what we're doing at Session. I've got 1.2 million monthly active users right now. So the app is growing really quickly, and we're having a lot of success right now. So, yeah.
Yeah. And from a user's perspective, the concept of being able to communicate with different people without having to use a phone number or metadata, and it's also permissionless and gives people sovereignty. So you don't need to worry about being allowed to communicate with people and what you can say and where you can say it. It gives each user much more freedom.
Sorry, guys, I
You're
was
muted,
muted.
Studa.
Muted.
Yeah. I realized. So that's excellent. There's a lot to dig in there. The first thing, though, which I want to ask you about, I was really excited. Of course, when I was reading, I knew about Session, but now, obviously, before this call, I did a bit more of a deep dive. And the first thing that welcomed me on your website was sending messages, not metadata, which is, of course, someone from NIM. I was really excited to read. So can we talk a little bit about how you guys make sure that that's true, that all we send on Session are messages and not metadata?
Yeah, so I mean, the app is built from a base level differently from the other centralized messaging applications that exist. So if you think about the metadata which might be associated with a message that you send on Telegram or Signal, typically you're going to be sending a message from your IP address directly to, say, the Signal servers. So the Signal servers have the ability to see that a certain IP address has sent a message at a certain time. They also, on the recipient side to that message, when someone fetches the message from the Signal server, they'll also see, okay, this IP address connected to our server and then downloaded that message. So it gets pretty easy to use like fairly basic timing analysis to say, okay, this person sent this message at this time, this person receives this message at this time, and then to link those users together, their IP addresses together. Even if like the messages are completely encrypted, even if like the server doesn't want to store that metadata, they will get that metadata and they are able to use it. And whether someone's hacked into the servers or there's a government request that comes along which says like you need to log these things or give us access to these IP addresses, that's one key point. The other key point is most messaging applications require a phone number to sign up. So immediately when you're signing up with that phone number, you're giving them a piece of personal information, and usually that phone number is associated to your account in some way. So when you're sending a message on the service, it's possible to map that back to your phone number most of the time. So those are like the key kind of areas where things get worrying in terms of centralized messaging applications. What Session does to prevent both of those things is it doesn't require a phone number to sign up. Basically just generate this account ID, which is a public-private key pair. It's completely random. And that becomes your identity on the network. So when someone wants to send you a message, you can exchange your public key with them, outside of the protocol, whether you're going to share it via QR code or send it to them via some other means. And then they'll use that to contact you, not your phone number. And then on the onion routing side, instead of connecting directly to the server that you're storing the messages on, you actually construct a route which has 3 different hops in it, and you send the message through that route. It's onion encrypted, and then it lands on the server. And the same on the recipient side as well. So when someone receives a message, they're also doing an onion route, requesting it from the server, and then it's coming back. So yeah, from that side, we've really controlled the metadata that can be gleaned from Session. There's a few other things we do, like blinding IDs and stuff like that, to even further prevent metadata collection. But yeah, those are the basic ways that metadata is protected on Session.
I really want to dig into the history of Session in a bit, but before that, I have two quick follow-up questions. One is whether the route is always the same between, for example, my device, and the servers, or I don't know, Theo's device, or is it different on a per message basis?
So the route is I would say like the route selection is maybe similar to Tor. So we try to preserve at least the guard node in the route as much as possible. And then when we get a certain amount of failures from that guard node, we will switch over to a new node in the network. That prevents like some attacks where, if your route was changing very often, you would be revealing your IP address to a whole bunch of the decentralized nodes on the network. So we try to kind of preserve at least the guard node. But it ends up being that routes do change fairly often, but it's not on a per message basis. It's more like you'll send a bunch of requests, and then maybe you'll get a failure, and then you'll go over to the next node.
Interesting. That's I mean, it's a great approach, and it still preserves user privacy. I was basically digging for the mixing, whether you have anything similar to what the mixnet does, in terms of like switching routes very often. The other question, though, is more from the other follow-up I have is more from my community manager side. Obviously, we have a pretty big Telegram presence with NIM. We have many channels and groups in many different languages too, and this is just because Telegram is used by a lot of people, and it's nice to be where the eyeballs are. Obviously, just for those in the audience who don't know or maybe wondering, Telegram is not great for privacy. It doesn't have end-to-end encryption by default at all, so don't trust it for anything that is private or sensitive at all. We're only there because basically the space is calling us to have presence on this platform. But you mentioned that creating an account is as simple as creating like a random, I think 66-digit ID, right? Does that lead to a lot of spam now that you have a lot of actual use? The session is picking up, and you said you have 1 million plus users. How do you control the spam and scam and like unwanted accounts problem?
Yeah, so there's a few ways. Obviously, like it's a complex challenge. Decentralized prevention of spam. The main way in terms of like one-to-one and closed groups, which are like the groups up to 100 people, and then like one-on-one when you're sending messages to people. There's actually like an explicit invite system. So to be able to send someone a message, you need to know their session ID first or their account ID first. So you can't just go spamming the entire network because there's no global directory of all of the IDs. You actually need to know the ID that you're talking to. And then there's also a system on top of that called message requests, which are basically like, if you think about like Facebook friend requests or something, right? Like when someone wants to talk to you, they send you a message request and you have to explicitly accept that. And then they can start sending messages back and forth. Everything else gets sorted into this folder, which is not part of your main conversation list. So it keeps like spam, if there was to be spam on the network, it kind of keeps it in a separate section so it doesn't overwhelm users. We also have communities. So communities are akin to, say, channels on Telegram, where you have a bunch of people that are sending messages back and forth. There may be thousands of people in this group. And the system that we're working on there is to have essentially like a customizable challenge that the operator of that community can forward to users when they join the group. So that might be like a capture-based system where they have to look at an image and they have to, say what the emojis are. But they can design the challenge to be whatever they want. So it might be some sort of pre-shared secret that that you have to put in, like that's been shared out of band, or it might be like a complex mathematics problem or something that is hard for an AI to get past, because obviously we're in an AI world where a lot of these captures are failing. So the idea behind the challenge system was to give the community operator a way to be able to do their own challenge, which would be strong against some of these kind of AI-based attacks.
Yeah, which make no mistake, are absolutely rampant. If you're an avid user of Telegram, which is a bit of a cesspool now of AI, then you probably know about this. Theo, do you have any questions for
Yeah, I
the
mean,
boys?
well, just tagging on to this, Telegram and Discord are just kind of like grandfathered in as things you have to do, and we see that. I was just thinking when you guys were talking, kind of the whole AI spam thing kind of is destroying, is kind of making people move to things like Session by itself, because it's becoming harder to just use the app. There's just scams and everything more and more. And I think I mean, that's probably your thesis too, that, people will move to more privacy technology step by step, either by, I think what I was getting at is how do we get people to choose privacy over convenience? I think a lot of people just use I mean, it's a tough question. And a lot of people use Telegram, Discord, or just, or WhatsApp or whatever other kind of product just because it's convenient, and they don't want to think about it. But what do you think is like one of the tipping points that we, all privacy technology can kind of poke at to kind of get people over to using more privacy apps?
I think a big thing here, and a lot of the time we pit privacy and convenience against each other. And there's this underlying assumption that things that are private can't also be convenient, which I don't think is true. And we can strive to make things which are private and convenient and easy to use. And that's something that we've really strived with Session. We do a lot of interviews and feedback with our user base to find out what's working well, what's not working well. And I think as well, there is also this assumption that invasions of privacy lead to more convenience, right? You get all access to all of this data that you can use to fine tune your application. You can make the button bigger, and get 0.05% more people to click it. And they stay in your app for 32 seconds longer on average. And how amazing is that, guys? We're optimizing. But actually, I think we're getting to the point now, and AI is really bringing this to a head, which is that this invasion of privacy is going to start causing people great inconveniences. The spam that we're talking about is actually an inconvenience that is the direct result, a lot of the time, of that lack of privacy that people have. And by taking it back, it gives people control over their lives again, over their digital lives, over their real lives, over who they're talking to, who knows what about them. And that is a really powerful thing and something that people are really valuing, especially because they're now actually, a lot of the time, there was this kind of monster under the bed that we talked about of, guys, you realize that these big tech companies, they're collecting all this information about you and they're going to use it to like ... serve ads to you. And if you were in the space, you understood what the consequences would be of this. But to mum and dad and grandma and grandpa, they just didn't care. But now, when they're getting scam calls and scam messages from people impersonating their family members, now they're really starting to care. And privacy is going to be a huge deal in 2025, and I think for the rest of the decade.
Yeah,
That's
I
an
totally
excellent
agree
point.
that. Yeah,
Go ahead.
Suda, I
Go
just
ahead,
want to
Theo.
say
Sorry.
I just wanted to say that's really wild that people getting these. I mean, I've heard of people getting spam calls just to get you to respond, and then the AI, voice maps your thing and then calls other people. Just really wild
Yep.
things like that. And I used just like real simple things like people used to call me out, Theo, you didn't answer my call. I was like, well, I don't have you in my contacts. But now that's normal. That should be normal now, because and that kind of goes to what you're saying, like you have to be invited or you have to share the key, the public key with each other. It's similar to so I think, yeah, totally, that's kind of what I was getting at. I think the whole landscape of the AI spamming and just how things are,
There's a flip.
privacy should be a convenience to actually like help enrich your daily life for just the average person. I think we're already sold on it. It's just the question is, how do we get a lot of people using a decentralized network so that it's a mass of people?
Yeah,
Suda?
the legacy technology of phone numbers was such a convenience for so long, but now it does really seem to be weaponized again and again. Every time there's a data leak or hack, there's your phone number, there's your address, there's all your details, ready for someone to just contact you directly and start scamming you as well. So yeah, it does feel like legacy tech is turning against the users, which is a good
I also
option.
think in terms of onboarding people, Theo, to your point, in getting people actually using this stuff, a lot of it, the devil is in the details of the actual user-facing product, and that's something that we've really realized with Session. I think you guys notice it with NimVPN as well. Of the easier you make it to jump in and actually start using it, people don't need to necessarily know or understand what's happening behind the scenes, just like they didn't know or understand what was happening behind the scenes of Facebook, right? You just need to give them something that works in the way that they want it to, that gives them the result that they're looking for, that looks nice, it works well. And we're getting to the point of the tech maturity now with decentralized tech, definitely with Session, that it's working really well. People download the app for the first time and they actually remark, oh, wow, this is actually really easy. I'm pleasantly surprised how good this is, how well this works. It's at the point where, I can get my mum to use the app quite happily every day now. And that is how we're going to get that cut through, by just making products that actually work for people.
This really is music to my ears, to hear this from companies like or like projects like Session, also to see it at NIM and a bunch of other projects now really understand the UX problem. We are up against so I think where the whole convenience against privacy sort of false dichotomy comes from is like the monsters that that Google and Facebook and these big companies are in terms of UX research. They are so much more ahead than anybody else. They had put in so many so many resources into this topic over the years, and I feel like these days, in the past like 5 to 10 years, we've really started catching up to the fact that you can develop the most private solution ever, and if two people use it, it's completely meaningless, right? You really gotta like nail down the UX so that everybody, including your grandma, your mom, anybody who don't know or care about privacy too much, can use it just as easily as something else. And I see a lot of progress, which gets me very excited about the space because it's much needed. Like you said, 2025. We didn't even get into all the ways. 2025 is getting quite crazy. Just spoke about AI and AI spam and the pig butchering scams and all of that stuff. There's more to worry about, right? But with all that said, let's wind the clock back a little bit to the beginnings of session. I want to dig into the lore a little bit. How did the project start? What's your history like?
You want to take it?
Yeah, for sure. So we started in 2018, actually. So that was, a very long time ago. I think that's probably when NIM started as well, or around 2018, because I remember going to some conferences and meeting Claudia and Harry at those conferences and talking about anonymous networking, actually. So that was, a bit of a throwback. But we started with this idea of we wanted to build an entire privacy stack. So we essentially wanted to build a private cryptocurrency, a private node network, and then have that node network host applications, private applications. So you'd have kind of a way that you could spend currency privately. You'd have a way where you could host applications, and then you could interact with those applications privately. I think what we came to learn from the course of 2018 to 2020, which is when we actually built out that node network and started promoting the ecosystem to developers and people who wanted to build on this, was that it wasn't well understood what you could actually build on top of a network like this. And at that point, we were like, okay, well, we understand the network the best of anyone. Perhaps we should build some test applications on top of the network and then give those out to developers to show what can be done. And one of those applications was a messaging application, because we thought, okay, if you build messaging, that's pretty generalizable to a lot of other kind of applications which might want to be built on the network. Like it uses storage, it uses the networking functionality. It can also use the crypto like the cryptocurrency functionality to send payments and stuff like that. So we started working on the messaging application. That got released within 6 months, and it was a very small kind of basic messaging application. And we thought, oh, this will just be a proof of concept. We'll put it out there. We'll see what people think. When we put it out there, I think the demand that we got from people to keep building this tool was actually way higher than what we thought it would be. People really thought that Session provided a level of anonymity and privacy that no other messaging application had provided to that point, and also provided a level of usability which was very high as well. So all of the other decentralized messengers at that point, you couldn't send a message to someone that was offline because they were mostly peer-to-peer based. So both of the users needed to be online at the same time to send a message. With Session, we had this network of 2,200 nodes that could store the messages offline. And then when someone came back online, they could fetch the message from there. So that was a really unique feature. So basically, over the course of 2020 and 2021, we decided to go really hard on Session, start building that out as the primary application, and start kind of depreciating other parts of the network which weren't as important to users. We basically followed the demand of what the users were asking for. And I think that's taken us to a point where we are now, where in 2025, we're moving the token off of a private token that's just going to become an ERC20 token, because people weren't really using the private cryptocurrency. They were more interested in Session and the incentives for the network, which didn't necessarily need to be private incentives. So we moved that functionality into an ERC20 token. We've really streamlined the network around Session and less around the whole developer ecosystem idea. And we've really pushed the idea of going really hard on Session, making it as user-friendly as possible, getting all the features that other messaging applications have, and just building that network. So that's a little bit of the history.
I feel like with Session as well, we looked at the messaging market, thought about what would make it so much better. What can you do with a decentralized network? How do you actually implement the technology of Web3 technology into messaging? And with the decentralized network, and like removing phone numbers and metadata, we believe that the actual outcome is way more secure than anything else that's out there. There's nobody else who's gone the full decentralized route, like cutting out metadata and delivering such a smooth experience. And I think that was our sort of initial vision in terms of, okay, what's everyone else doing? How do we do it better? And let's get there.
There's actually so there are a lot of similarities, of course, between the NIM journey and the session journey. Particularly, this is a decision that we made early on. Obviously, we also have a token, the NIM token, and it is not a privacy coin, right? It has the same transparency properties as Bitcoin or Ethereum does, although it's on a Cosmos SDK blockchain. And that is because we really wanted to focus in on the privacy properties of the mixnet without hampering it with delistings, regulatory issues, and all of the various things that you can run into if you have a privacy coin. So that's interesting. Before exploring the parallels, though, I want to go a little bit further back, and I want to ask you guys what prompted you to want to create this suite of privacy tech, privacy coin, like a network and a developer platform. Because in the case of NIM, it was very much the main catalyst was very much the Snowden revelations. So that's what kicked things off, and that's what inspired a lot of the research that then ended up with the foundation of NIM a bunch of years later. What about your side?
I think for me, like my interest in privacy and building something that was outside of the scope of surveillance technology, that mostly came from like when I got into the cryptocurrency space, learning about Bitcoin, and people kept saying, "Oh, Bitcoin is like private and anonymous." And then when you actually look at the technology behind Bitcoin, it's actually not very private or anonymous, in any real way. So then I started getting into some of the privacy coins like Monero, and at the same time was getting involved with Tor and stuff like that, like using those tools and reading about how they were built. And it was kind of a combination of all of those things being put together. So you kind of had this private cryptocurrency, and at the same time, if like there were some coins like Dash that were coming up that were using a cryptocurrency to incentivize a network of nodes to operate. So we could kind of clearly see at that point how you could combine a private cryptocurrency to incentivize a network of nodes and then build a protocol like Tor or like a storage protocol or an onion routing protocol on top of that network. So I think it was just kind of naturally like plugging a whole bunch of different holes that we saw in the market together with different technologies that we saw in the market together and creating something that was more than like a sum of its pieces.
I forgot to ask before, but it's actually kind of an interesting and important question. Is the network incentivized, or is it more like Tor and a voluntary basis, or ran on a voluntary basis?
Network's fully incentivized, so you need to stake coins. So like similar to running Ethereum node, for example, you stake some cryptocurrency, you run a software on a node, and then as long as your node is performing properly and meeting all of the requirements of the network, then you earn a reward in tokens for doing that. So I guess it's quite similar to NIM in that way.
Yes, it's very similar. I'm asking these, by the way. I'll break the fourth wall. I know all of these things. I'm just asking these questions as if I didn't, because that usually makes for great conversation. All right, so another topic, which is a bit more of a touchy one, but what I'm super interested in. I did mention how the Snowden revelations and the prison program getting out was a key driver behind the founding of NIM, and it really showed in practice that the GPA, the global passive adversary, was talked about a lot in cryptographic circles. As a theoretical, if we had a GPA, if that was an adversary, then what could we do, and how could we defend against it? And But when the Snowden revelations happened, when it came out that there is a prison program, it became a fact of reality that there not only is it possible to have a GPA, but actually there is one already functioning that day. So that really kicked off a lot of great people thinking about how to solve this problem and how to protect against this. Now, also while researching session for this call, I found out that you guys moved operation to Switzerland recently from Australia. Can we talk about that a little bit? What is the landscape like in Australia? Because when I read up on it in the past few days, it was a bit shocking to me that it looks, to me, even worse than the United States in terms of surveillance, which is a big thing to say. How do you feel about this? Can you tell me about the whole move to Switzerland situation?
Yeah, it is a big thing to say. I think, as with a lot of things in life, it's difficult to separate these countries when you're talking about surveillance, especially two countries which were as closely related as Australia and the US. They're in cahoots a lot of the time. They're sharing information, they're sharing intelligence. And a lot of the time, they're also, passing legislation and new ideas on how to surveil people around to each other as well. And a lot of the time, Australia has really been pushing the envelope in this sense, and it has restricted a lot of innovation when it comes to encryption and decentralized technology in the country. And also, it's going to have a long-term effect on people's rights, of course, as well, because we already have this natural issue emerging with privacy, and it's being exacerbated by really poorly thought out policy at the same time. So in Australia, there's a relatively comprehensive framework of notices which can be served to companies, to compel them to do a variety of things, including adding backdoors, which is why having open source and decentralized technology is so critical. And part of the reason that we're in this space is to try and get around some of these very, large hammers that state actors are coming with. And a lot of the time, we felt like that was a really good defense against this kind of, as I'm saying, poorly thought out legislation and regulation, which had been stacking up in Australia, and slowly been rolled out in places like the UK, and other sort of regional countries in the Asia Pacific as well, after Australia led the way with TOLA in 2018. So we felt like things were going okay, but in the last probably 18 months, the dial got turned up and the heat was starting to get a little bit high for our liking. You had the directors of Australian intelligence agencies basically saying, oh, we've been playing ball so far. Actually, this has been us playing nice. We've held back from using these powers for the most part. But if all these companies with their encryption and their zero knowledge and stuff, if they don't start finding a way for us to get in, we're going to have to start thinking about what we're going to do next and how we're going to use these powers against you. And then we had some other reasons for thinking that we might be coming under the microscope as well. And so we thought, all right, guys, for the good of the project, we'd had a lot of resistance. Our whole team had been in Australia. All the founders had met in Australia originally, to meet up in Melbourne, and got together, and everything blossomed there. So we loved that heritage, and having that as part of the project. But for the good of the ecosystem and for the good of Session, we realized we had to make the decision, it's time to get out. We've got to go somewhere that's thinking more deeply about these issues, that has more measured regulatory frameworks that we can kind of participate in, and that's welcoming of decentralized technology as well, and has a bit of a community of decentralized technologists that we can work with, and we'll have our backs if things ever go south, which just doesn't exist so much in Australia. So yeah, Switzerland's been a good home for us so far. Hopefully things stay that way.
Well, that's not a fact either, based on some recent developments. I'm sure you saw the proposed legislation, which would require companies like yours and ours to do KYC on their users, which is, anyways. Hopefully,
it's not clear how it would work yet, but it's still just a proposal. So hopefully, we're in consultation at the moment. Hopefully, we can turn that one around.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it does feel like even in Switzerland, which has its heart in the right place, I would say, especially to like the Five Eye countries, compared to the Five Eye countries, right? Even there, it seems like it's a constant, okay, let's do this incredibly authoritarian thing. Maybe let's not do that incredibly authoritarian thing. Like there's always like this push and pull,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Now, my big hope is that at some point, especially when it comes to something like session or the NIM mixnet, uh, governments will also realize that it's in their best interest to keep these technologies and use them and make them as
Yeah.
powerful as possible. And in that case, the development costs are distributed across a way larger number of people, and you have a big anonymity set, so it gives privacy and security not only to the terrible terrorists who are lurking in every corner everywhere, but also government operations. I hope that this will be a
Yep.
realization that they make at some point, and they will realize that it's actually the best way to go.
I think this is already dawning on a lot of lawmakers and regulators and politicians around the world now. And I mean, even you see the signal gate generated quite a lot of discussion around this, right? Of we're seeing high level security officials using these tools, and then on the other hand, there are lawmakers looking to undermine them. And so you've got a pretty clear conflict there. We need to straighten things out. And I mean, it's definitely the case that you would have intelligence agencies utilizing technology like Tor, for example, to protect their work and to complete their work, and they would be relying on it probably quite heavily. Maybe NIM, maybe Session, who knows? But definitely these tools, overwhelmingly, this is an argument that comes up a lot. Overwhelmingly, these are tools that are designed for and used by normal people. And it's not necessarily that there should be any skepticism or questions which arise out of just a normal person wanting privacy for no particular reason other than they want to have their privacy, right? That's totally reasonable. That's a right that everybody has. And so that's what these tools are designed for and designed to protect. And that's mostly how they're used. So
I have a question here, which I really wanted to ask you guys, and I try to ask this from everyone I speak to in the privacy space. The bad people do bad things meme is a very powerful one. Let's be honest. It's actually probably the biggest sort of concern for us in the privacy space. What you just outlined, that these technologies are not used by people in like ski masks with like in like a like a leather gloves sitting at their laptops and doing terrible things. It's average random people. Uh, um, Use these technologies, and they should, because privacy is a fundamental human right. Yet this meme, what about the bad people doing bad things, is very pervasive. It's everywhere. I read the Guardian article about you guys moving to Switzerland, and in there, the government AFP, I think, is the
AFP,
yeah, AFP was making this case exactly, that these tools are being used by these bad people. These tools can be used by these bad people. So this is like a very pervasive argument, which people seem to be accepting as well. What's your big secret weapon against this argument? How can we defeat this argument once and for all?
Again, I think it's that same line. Overwhelmingly, these tools are used by normal people doing normal things, or even good people doing good things. And the idea that we should take these tools that are protective and safeguards away from them for fear that someone else might misuse them is completely unreasonable. We shouldn't be stripping the rights of our entire society, our entire community, and people who might really need them as protections. They might be at-risk people, people like journalists or activists, for example, who without those tools, they're actually going to be severely exposed. And we're saying, oh, well, we're going to put them at risk because we're going to put our trust that, we need to go and catch these handful of bad guys. I don't accept that reasoning at all. And besides that as well, I think we do have a bigger, grander issue in the scheme of privacy at the moment, right? Overwhelmingly, the web and the internet, it's not a private place. Most of the things we do, they're not private. Surveillance in streets with cameras and digital transactions and things like that, it's easier to track people than ever, right? And the last few vestiges of privacy that we have in society that are so critical for some of the most important work that upholds all of the things that we hold near and dear, we're saying that we're going to strip that away as well. It's completely ridiculous and unacceptable.
Amen. Nothing to add there. It is indeed like we have this world of tech, right? I have this phone. It is an incredibly capable device. It's kind of crazy that I have it in my pocket every day. And the affordances that it provides to someone who is like the affordances it provides, the fact that everybody has one of these in their pockets, to someone who like a powerful entity who wants to surveil everyone all the time, is absolutely insane. And we just have to
Yeah.
if you just continue down that path and you start thinking about the implications of this in an increasingly polarized and crazy world, it's not great. If you think about some of the darkest chapters of human history, how they could have played out if everyone had one of these in their pockets, which they didn't at the time. It's not fun at all. So here's hoping that that this message gets out, and yeah, that more and more people will use privacy preserving technologies, and here's hoping that the big companies who are currently producing not so privacy preserving technologies will have to adopt at some point, and this will just be like a common good that everybody has access to whatever they use. It's gonna be like no leaded gasoline on the streets anymore. It's a done fight.
Yeah.
You want it. It's gonna be like that, and we can just move on and have our privacy.
I think as well, there's kind of this assumption in the we need access to all of these services, these messages, or this internet traffic, or whatever, this VPN's logs. These are authorities that are really well resourced. They have access to a lot of information and
Can you do
access
some
to a
police
lot
work, maybe?
of expertise. They probably they've got enough already.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the other absurd thing, that there is a thing called old-fashioned police work. You can still do that. You can investigate people. You can go there, sit in the car with a warrant and like watch them with the little like binoculars and all of that good stuff. You don't have to like surveil. Like you don't need the haystack to find the needle. That's the incorrect assumption. It's terrible. It's bad for everyone, and it's just against our rights. All right, gentlemen. It was lovely to hear that we agree on. I mean, it's not surprising at all, but of course, it's nice to hear that we're in such agreement on these topics. We got to jump into the community questions. So, big thanks for our community joining us in these unusual hours. And first question is from Jason Jig. Thanks for the question, Jason. Any other apps on Oxen? Maybe let's also take some time and explain to people what Oxen is.
Yeah, so like as I talked about before, Oxen is essentially the cryptocurrency that is undergirding Session right now. We are transitioning right now from that private cryptocurrency, which is essentially a fork of Monero, to Session token, and that's all going to be happening very soon. Right after we're on this call, we're going to jump on a call with Legion as well, which is doing some community work with us, which has been fantastic. But essentially, we started with this vision of, Oxen would be the blockchain where there would be apps built on top of that. We built Session first as one of those applications as a proof of concept. But I think we've kind of come to the realization that focusing our effort on building out Session and focusing the network around Session has been a better use of time. So that actually we've kind of minimized the work on trying to get other applications built on top of Oxen. We are still working on LokiNet, which is a more advanced onion routing tool, because our onion routing in Session right now is fairly slow. So we're working on that side of things, but there isn't too many community-built applications on top of Oxen right now, just because that hasn't really been what we've been trying to promote or push to developers.
Excellent. Thanks for that answer, and thanks again for the question, Jason. Next question is from Beyond. I think we sort of addressed like bits and pieces of this in these past few minutes, but let's answer it. So Beyond is asking, how do you feel about the fact that with the growing popularity of your app, it may become a default ban in some countries, as it can be used by darknet users, terrorists, etc., as mentioned earlier. Actually, I will ask a follow up to this. Are there any countries where it's already banned, where people can't use session? I guess there are some countries, right?
Yeah. Pretty quickly, I think the first country was China, then it was Iran, then it was Russia. So session.
I think we're back on Russia.
Yeah, it's always tricky with whether you're banned or not, because sometimes like it's specific internet service providers are putting in rules and then other internet service providers aren't. So it often we think that like, it's just a national effort, and probably the place where that's most prevalent is China. But in other countries like Russia and Iran, it's a bit more of a patchwork where the government will kind of come down and say, okay, you should, to the ISPs, like these particular IP addresses need to be blocked. And then they'll implement that to varying degrees of success. If they don't have the resources, sometimes it doesn't even get blocked at all. So, yeah, we're already blocked in several countries. That comes down to the fact that although we have a decentralized network, the nodes in the network are fairly stable. So we probably get a churn rate of 2 or 3% of the nodes leaving the network and then some coming back in. So the IP addresses aren't rotating that frequently. So you can kind of get those IP addresses and block the entire network from a nation state like firewall level. So it comes down then to like more censorship resistance in the network. There's technologies like domain fronting, refraction networking, which you can deploy to get around some of these things. This is obviously something that VPNs face a lot as well. So, I'm sure that you guys have thought about technologies that you can deploy to NIM as well to make them work in countries where, they're kind of scraping all of the VPN IP addresses and blocking those.
Yes.
Just to address
indeed.
quickly the question from Beyond as well, a little bit more directly, which is, I think we should always treat this type of ban with this type of justification with a lot of suspicion. This is something which is used against a lot of encrypted tools, whether it's Session or Signal or probably, WhatsApp, Telegram gets this as well. A lot of the time, this argument is made, but overwhelmingly, again, these tools are for normal people. And that's who is using them, and they're using them for perfectly normal things. So be very suspicious of these claims.
Yes. And just a quick note on censorship resistance. We actually did a whole episode with our research and development team, Anya and Jack. So maybe Salazar, you could find a link and drop it in chat. So if the audience is interested in the censorship resistance measures that are in the making at NIM. Thanks for the question, Beyond, as always. Next up is from Crete. Is there a system to this? I think this is a good question, not on the surface, but when you start thinking about it, it's an interesting one. Is there a system to check if a user is sending the same message to many accounts? Probably in response to the whole spam problem, right?
Yeah. The core of that answer is no, because the messages are encrypted, so you can't necessarily know the contents of what is being sent. There are some network controls around spam as well to make sure that particularly, these are early in development as well, I would say. But one of the things you could think about doing is maybe at a guard node level, limiting the amount of kind of messages that an individual can send from a single IP address, because the guard node will always see the IP address of the first or of the person who's sending the message. They won't know where the message is going, but they will still be able to see how much content is being sent. So those are the types of things that we're talking about in terms of like network level prevention of spam. But as I spoke about before, a lot of this is just limited at the client level. So you need to know someone's session ID to be able to send them a message. There's no global directory of all of the account IDs or session IDs on the network. So it's quite hard to like come up with a list of people to spam, because you would actually need to be shared their session ID or their account ID. So unless you're kind of doing web scraping to try and get people's session ID that they're posted publicly, it's quite hard to develop a list of all of these IDs that you're sending messages to.
Yeah, I would have been pretty surprised if you said yes. Of course, there is such a system. Would have been a bit weird, you know. So my the reason why this question is interesting to me is because um, it kind of in just one or two extra steps you can get to client side scanning from the logic. Like if you do have a system like this, that's almost never the right solution, right? There are other ways of achieving the same thing without compromising someone's like message history, or like looking deeper into what they are communicating about and with whom. So yeah, but it's always a bigger problem than if you had that log and you could just look at a table of data and you could be like, oh yeah, this person is sending all of these same messages. That's probably make it easier, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for the question, Crete. Next up is also from Beyond. Why did you decide to go the way of the cryptocurrency market with tokens, etc., instead of the standard way as Signal does?
So it's a massive strength of our network to be able to have 2,200 nodes out there that are financially or like rewarded in token for operating. Because we don't have control over the code that they're running. So we do a release, they update, and the node network will bring on the latest version. It's completely open source. We can't force them to run that code. We can't hide that code. It's completely transparent. And a key difference between that network that's autonomously operating, running completely open source code that is verifiable by third parties at all times, is a humongous advantage in terms of security and privacy. Because at the end of the day, if we had access to the servers, then it can be quite risky from sort of a centralized threat model.
Yeah, I will also say, obviously, there's been a lot of other kind of decentralized technologies that have been built that don't rely on a cryptocurrency. So you have a network like Tor, for example, which is run on a community basis. People set up nodes and they'll route data. A lot of the issues that Tor has faced in the past, though, are Sybil attack issues. So you don't know the people who are running the Tor nodes. They just need the network resources. They're able to set up a node on the network and provide those resources. And if it's found that 10% or 20% of the Tor network is run by a government or a surveillance operation, there isn't any way to kind of financially penalize them. You can remove their nodes from the network, which is what Tor does with their kind of centralized directory authority. But there's nothing stopping that person just going to a new data center or renting out new IP addresses and setting up the same nodes on the network, which are doing the same operations. When you have a stake associated with a node, you can actually punish nodes by slashing their stake and financially penalizing them. So it becomes easier to kind of limit the amount of damage that one person can do over time, because you can incur a financial penalty for doing that. So that's like one of the things. I will also say, like, building these decentralized networks where you're attracting a lot of node operators to the network, it's just a lot harder to do without incentives behind it. You can very easily spin up a network with 2,000 nodes like we have if you provide a small financial incentive for people to actually run those nodes and operate the infrastructure in the network. And that in itself also like lowers the amount of, it's a competitive advantage because the business doesn't need to pay directly for an AWS cluster of like 200 nodes or whatever, which is going to cost you like $1 million a year or something like that. So it's a competitive advantage as well.
Exactly. There's a bootstrapping problem with networks, right? You need a large, well-functioning network with many nodes, so so that it can work appropriately. But you need usage to be able to like fund a network like that, and it's like a chicken or the egg problem. So that's also, I mean, in the case of NIM, that was one of the main reasons why we launched our own token, because we could like develop our own token economics, and we could like set aside a large fund called the mixed mining pool, which then bootstrap the network. And we even before NimVPN launched, we saw like large scale use of the network. We had hundreds of people operating the infrastructure. That's very hard to pull off without a lot of upfront investment and yeah. So that's probably another part of the story. Thanks for that answer, and thanks for the question, Beyond. Next up is also from Beyond. He asked a lot of questions today. He's really interested in session, it looks like. What about regional user support, namely localization, as NIM does? So for context, we work with our community to translate the NIM VPN interface, our blog, even recently our help center and website into various different languages. Do you guys have something similar? Is the app available in different languages?
Yep. We actually just did a very big project to unify all of our strings in all of the different applications. So across Android, iOS, and desktop, we now use a common set of like strings in English. And then we use Crowdin, which is essentially like a community translation platform where all of those strings will go up for every single piece of interface in the application. And then people can translate those strings into their own home language. So I think right now, it's about 79 different languages, if I recall correctly, that sessions, been translated into or partially translated into. And that's, not probably 90% of that is, the community coming along, looking at the strings, translating things as we put them in. So that's been huge for us as well.
That's insane. That's a lot of languages. Congratulations. Yep. That's a really, really big effort. It's nice to see that that the app is available in so many languages. Thanks for another question, Beyond. Next up is from Rocio. If malware was installed on my mobile phone, would it be possible to find out who really uses session and break my privacy? So basically, another way of saying that, would session be protected in any way against something like a Pegasus attack against you personally or something similar?
Unfortunately, not. It tends to be that session is focusing on one layer of the stack, which assumes that your mobile phone is not being compromised. If someone is compromising your mobile phone, then they generally assume that they'll be able to read the messages as you send them, scrape messages from your local database. But it depends on what type of compromise the local device is under. So session still has, all of the modern operating systems like Android and iOS have like sandboxing. So apps exist in their own sandbox, and it's hard for another application to get access to their data on the phone. But if you're talking about kind of a root level access, there's really there's not much that you can do as an application developer who's developing on top of that phone to make the user more secure, apart from encrypting data locally on the device. But once the device is open, the user can, the hacker can see the passwords that the user's putting in, and that usually pretty quickly defeats such local encryption. So it would be the same issue that you would have, like if you were using a VPN client, for example, on a fully compromised device. Then the device itself, the attacker is seeing, what websites you're going to or what you're doing on your computer, right? So it's a tricky problem to solve. But I mean, luckily that there are privacy companies that are working on every single layer of the stack. So although we may not be working on secure hardware or secure operating systems, there are people who are working on that technology. So say Graphene OS for phones. That's a great technology to make sure that your phone is way harder to compromise than say stock Android. There's people who are working on secure hardware as well that are building kind of open source phones and computers that are at much lower risk to being compromised. So it's really an approach like where you have to kind of layer these different stacks together.
Yeah, and just for context, guys, make no mistake, this is true of NIM VPN as well, and also this is true of most other like privacy-preserving apps that you could be using. If your phone is compromised, that's a threat model that none of these apps can like reasonably protect you against. So keep that in mind. Don't get a government to install a Pegasus on your phone. You heard it here first. Theo?
Hey, what's up? All right, yeah. So, I mean, we have someone in the chat keep asking me for a joke, so I just thought of one. I told my therapist that I was using Session. Now she doesn't know how I feel.
Nice.
Very, very good one. With that said, apologies to the audience. I see a few more questions. Thanks for the many great questions, but we don't have time to answer anymore because the team has to leave us on top of the hour. So I have to thank you, boys, for joining us today. I think this was a really fun chat, and maybe we could have you back at some point on one of these community calls.
For sure.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right, excellent. It was lovely to find out about Session. It's a great app. Also, it's a great project. So I recommend everybody doing a bit more research. Where can people read a bit more about your tech? Is it just the website, or is there something like a secret resource that you want to share with the NIM community today?
I think website's probably the best place to go to start. So if you go to getsession.org, that'll have the white paper and the light paper. So you can read into that, get into the technical details. All of the code is open source on GitHub, including all of the clients, all of the code that's run on the decentralized nodes in the network. So you can get involved in that as well. And we've got a big community. There's communities on Session that you can get involved in, and we're across Twitter and Telegram, because we need to be there, unfortunately. But yeah, we've got a big community, and I just urge you to get involved and just test out the application. You can send me a message, or we're all contactable on Session as well if you have any issues, or you just want to, say the app's amazing.
Only.
That said, big thanks again for joining us, Session team. This was absolutely fascinating, and also big thanks to our community for listening in. Some people are like Rocio actually woke up very early from in Ecuador to join us and listen to this call. So big thanks for that as well. Hopefully you guys learned something. You can check out Session's website. It's been linked in the chat. And there's nothing else left to do than the little tradition that we have here at NIM. So you guys are going to get your POAPs for participating in this call. So you need to go to the usual link, which is nim.com/go/POAP. And the secret phrase is, drum roll, onion routing. Hopefully now after this call you understand why we chose this secret phrase for this call. Obviously it's very relevant to what the guys over at Session are doing. A quick note, if you're watching the recording of this, instead of the usual like 15-30 minute window, the POAP claiming is open for 12 hours because of the different timing of the call. So feel free to go and check if it's still open if you're watching the recording. Big thanks again for joining, guys. It was a lovely call, and hopefully see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks
so much.
See ya.
Great to be here. Thanks. Ciao.